Happy Monday. Happy Monday to all 0 of the fans that are in here currently that I can see on the screen. Trent, I had to lead into the show with that. Have you been following the beef between Kendrick Lamar and Drake? Have you been keeping up with this rap beef that's been going on over the last couple weeks?
Well, do you want me to be honest with you or act like I know what's going on?
Shoot me straight. I just want to know.
I have no idea.
I figured that might be the case. To be honest, I really don't know either, other than what I see on social media. But I had to come in with Kendrick a little bit for anybody paying attention. Seems like he got the edge on Drake there. But we can't spend a lot of time on that, Trent, because we got a loaded show. And before we went live, I told you that, look, Trent might have to carry the show tonight. I am battling allergies. My eyes are a little bit screwed up. I've got my ice pack here that you're probably going to see me dabbing on the back of my neck. But we can't take days off here, Trent. We can't spend all day laying around on the couch, playing video. We got shit to do. And so we had to kick off the new format on Monday evening. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see what the turnout is. There's a lot we got to talk to tonight. Let's start off with, I know you didn't follow the rap battle. Did you happen to tune in to the roast of Tom Brady on Sunday night, the Netflix special? Did you catch that one?
I saw bits and pieces of it. I didn't see the entire thing, but I saw plenty of clips on Twitter. There were some good ones on there, man. The what was it? The comedian that Tom Brady did not like. What was his name?
The bald guy?
Yeah.
What you're talking, Jeff Ross, the roast master?
Dude, yeah. Brady did not like that one at all.
No. He didn't like that one. It didn't seem like he liked that one at all. And Jeff Ross, obviously, for anybody who watches these roasts, like, that's what this guy does. Like, I don't know Jeff Ross from anywhere else other than doing roasts on Comedy Central. And you know, I put out that article about it. This is what he does. Like, he's known for being a guy that pushes the boundaries with his jokes. And he certainly pushed the boundary with that massage joke, and it didn't seem like Tom Brady was a big fan of it. So I thought that was an interesting part of the night. I do think that social media tried to blow that up a little bit more than what it actually was, but I thought that was an interesting moment. But damn, the GOAT it was a 3-hour roast, number one. Okay, 3 hours, that's a long time. I watched the whole damn thing, and it was just... I don't know why anybody would subject themselves to that. I mean, they were, you know, ripping on him for his failed marriage, plastic surgery. And look, when I say ripping on him for his failed marriage, I mean, I'm deep, intimate details about what happened there and what led to the divorce. I didn't even realize that, you know, there was some sort of, I don't even know if I want to get into it. I think Giselle cheated on him, was like some taekwondo or karate master or some shit like that.
That was one of them I heard. I forget who it was, but talking about how she went to some class for, what was it, 5 times a week?
All of them. Every single person talked about it. Every single person talked about that. And yeah, Matt Kirby from the Facebook page, he says Drew Bledsoe's was the best. I thought that was hilarious too. Obviously, Drew Bledsoe and Tom Brady have a history. Drew Bledsoe got injured, and Tom Brady came in, took his job, and then never looked back. So it was really funny to see Bledsoe have the opportunity to go out there and throw some jabs at him. Bill Belichick was in the house. Robert Kraft was in the house. Rob Gronkowski, his portion of the roast was absolutely just hilarious. But yeah, man, that's I think for anybody who's considering possibly doing something like that in the future, like a professional athlete, somebody like that, go watch that roast of Tom Brady for 3 hours and you tell me why you want to put yourself in that chair. I have no idea, but that was incredible TV last night. Glad I got to tune in. And for anybody that didn't get to see it, I think it's still up on Netflix. You can go watch the I don't know, what do you call it? The repeat, the replay, whatever it is. It's going to be up on Netflix for a little while. So I would encourage you to go check that out. Let's transition. You know, we're going to do a little bit of a hybrid here. We started off talking about Brady. You know, we're going to start off with some NFL / Michigan type stuff. And Trent, this affects you greatly. We're going to come right out of the gate with it. LaShawn McCoy, who I don't know much about. I know he had a successful stint in the NFL. You know, he's a Pro Bowler. I think he won a couple of Super Bowls in the latter part of his career. He's now an NFL commentator. And in recent days on the show he's a part of, LaShawn McCoy was asked, you know, they went around the panel and they said, who are the biggest losers? Who's your biggest loser in the NFL draft? And by the time they got to LaShawn McCoy, he said it was the Minnesota Vikings. And the reason for that specifically was their pick of JJ McCarthy at number 10. And before I ask you your thoughts on this, because Trent, you're a Michigan guy, you're a Vikings guy, you write about the Michigan Wolverines, you write about the Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to read LaShawn McCoy's. I'm going to try to get through it. It was brutal. It was a brutal listen. It's brutal to read. But for anybody that didn't hear it, I'm going to read some of it. And then Trent, I'm going to ask you for your thoughts. So LaShawn McCoy, he says the Vikings are the biggest loser, and the reason is JJ McCarthy. This is what he says, and I quote, "When I watch Michigan, who was ran by Harbaugh last year, if you look at the way he runs his offense, his teams run the ball, play defense, throw the ball here and there, but that's not his thing. Right now, he has one of the best quarterbacks in football with Justin Herbert, and he's still drafting linemen. He's getting rid of wide receivers. He's adding a lot bigger linemen, and he's running the ball," which is a little bit weird to me because Jim Harbaugh hasn't even coached his first game with the Chargers yet. But in any event, he says it's smash mouth football, same way he did it at Michigan. And I don't understand that, because it's like, well, why do you go out here and get you a quarterback like this? What shows you that JJ can go out there and win games for you? What shows you that he can go out there and win games with his arm? So I say the Vikings are the biggest losers because you go out there and you get JJ. What shows you that? When I watch his tape, and I call bullshit on that, I don't think McCoy watched any tape at all, but he says, when I watch his tape, maybe there's something I don't know. I don't know his leadership. I don't know what type of player he is in the huddle. I don't know that. And those things matter. There's not an attribute for that, but those things matter. But when I watch his game tape, nothing jumps off like, yo, I got to have this dude at number 10. So when you ask me who's the biggest loser, I'm going with him. I guess the only thing I can say is that he's a winner. He did get a championship. Holy hell, a lot to unpack there, Trent. I mean, I'm going to throw it to you. Like I said, you're a Michigan guy. You're a Vikings guy. LaShawn McCoy, former All-Pro Super Bowl champion, says that the Vikings are the biggest losers. What say you?
Well, first off, isn't it ironic how a running back, somebody who wants the ball in their hands, they want to run it every single time, he's bashing Jim Harbaugh for being a running team? Like, wouldn't that be something you'd be like, hey, dude, I like that coach. He still wants to run the ball. He's old school. He's not this new throw it 50 times a game. So that part I thought was really weird to begin with, that there must be something there with Harbaugh that he does not like. There must be something there. But anyway, going back to the Vikings, I agree with you. I don't think that he's seen JJ's tape at all. If he has, then he's seen JJ make every throw in the book. We've seen it. You're right. He's right that Michigan didn't lean on McCarthy per se. They had a terrific running game with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, and they had a great offensive line. They didn't have to throw the ball 30, 40 times a game. But as I've said before, I feel like if you put JJ McCarthy in Oregon's offense, or even Washington when they had with Michael Penix, I think he tears it up. I think he puts up fantastic numbers because he can throw the ball. And something else that McCoy said, not knowing his leadership qualities and how he is in the huddle. Yeah, that is huge because that's a big part of what JJ is as a quarterback and as a leader. He's a great leader. He's going to be a captain on the Vikings. It's a terrific situation for JJ to walk into. He has Justin Jefferson. He has Jordan Addison. He has TJ Hawkinson. They just picked up Aaron Jones, who's a solid running back. They have an above average offensive line. It's a terrific situation. I'm not just saying that because I've covered JJ McCarthy and I'm a Vikings fan. I truly, truly believe that this is a great situation for both JJ McCarthy, the Minnesota Vikings, mainly because of who their coach is, Kevin O'Connell, who's an offensive-minded coach. Heck, look what he did with Joshua Dobbs last year. Kirk Cousins goes down. He gets Dobbs to come in. Dobbs looked fantastic the first couple of games, and it's because O'Connell was relaying everything that he needed to do through the microphone. So, yeah, I call complete bullcrap on Shady. He didn't watch any of his tape or any of that stuff.
Look at Trent pulling out bullcrap. That's how you know you've pissed Trent off. When he says bullcrap, you've taken Trent to a level he doesn't want to go to, but damn it, you forced him into a corner. I 100% agree, Trent. I agree with you. I'm going to need my ice pack for this one, my allergy ice pack. it's just such a lazy take. To me, that was such a lazy take. This was clearly somebody who didn't watch a lot of film on JJ McCarthy. Maybe he's not a big Michigan football fan. Maybe he's not a Jim Harbaugh fan. I don't know. Maybe he's not a Vikings fan. I don't know what his deal is. But to sit up there and call the Vikings the biggest losers of the draft, when I think by all accounts they had a pretty damn good draft, and then to point to a kid like JJ McCarthy and use the same old tired line, he can't throw the ball. He didn't do anything with his arm. We didn't see him do anything. Like, that is lazy. That is somebody who didn't watch film, because we saw guys who did watch film, like an RG3 or a Dan Orlovsky. These guys spent weeks breaking down JJ McCarthy's tape and some of the reads he would make and some of the tight throws he would make. And it looked very, I guess maybe to people who don't understand what's happening, it looked all pedestrian. It looked like just normal shit that a quarterback does. But these guys who played quarterback in the NFL, or you play it at a high level, they could sit back and they could see the read he was making, the way that he was looking at the field, and the way, the decision-making process and where he would choose to go through the ball or throw the ball. And they knew that this guy had something special. And so LaShawn McCoy, I don't know what his deal is. I don't know what his gripe is, but there's a lot of these analysts out there that just, maybe it is like we've seen in the comments here. You want to get clicks. You want to get, people to view your stuff and talk about. I mean, hey, we're talking about it right now on our little podcast. And so I think to that end, it did its job, but I don't know that you necessarily want to be popular for bad takes. There was a guy who, I think he still works for the Fox network. Is he a former Buckeye? RJ Young. Is he from Ohio State?
I don't know, but it seems like he definitely leans towards Ohio State.
Look, he might not. I don't know what his background is, but the only reason I even know anything about RJ Young is because he made a lot of noise off of routinely bad takes. And so,
his top 25s, they were horrible.
They were worse than our list, Trent. They were way worse than our list.
I think last year, RJ Young came out with a preseason top 25, and Michigan wasn't even included.
Michigan wasn't. They just happened to win the national championship that same year, but whatever. It's not a big deal. Yeah. I don't know, man. I thought it was a lazy take when I saw it come up on social media. I'm like, I'm really curious what Trent thinks about this, because here you have a Michigan guy. Here you have a Vikings guy. Trent, you were all in on the Vikings taking JJ McCarthy, regardless of where they were going to be able to get him. You thought that was going to be the guy for the franchise. That's obviously the move that they made, and we'll see how it pans out. We all know that there is no surefire guarantees when it comes to drafting quarterbacks in the league. And if that was the case, you would see a guy like Johnny Manziel still doing well in the NFL. You would see some of these high draft picks performing at a high level, but that's not always what happens. Personally speaking, Caleb Williams, number 1 draft pick in 2024, I think he's going to be a bust. I don't think he has a long-term career in the NFL, but that's the beauty of this, is eventually we will find out. These guys are going to get their shot. And who is Sam Darnold is who JJ's competing with. Is that correct?
Yeah. Did you see Johnny Manziel's take on the situation?
I did see that, yeah.
Okay.
So Johnny Manziel, he singled that battle out, and he said, look, Sam Darnold's a good quarterback. There's a reason why he was taken in the draft where he was. JJ, if I recall correctly, the specific words were JJ's going to have his hands full with Sam Darnold. And I think that's great. I think that's great for Sam Darnold. I think that's great for JJ McCarthy. And I think that's great for the Vikings organization, because that shows that you've got 2 guys who can come in, who can legitimately be your QB1, and they're going to battle it out. And we'll see where things fall once the NFL season kicks off. But I just feel like maybe it is because we covered him during his collegiate career. Maybe it's because we had the opportunity, to spend a little more time with him, considerably more time than national analysts did. That's for sure. Maybe it's the maize and blue glasses that we're wearing, but I feel like JJ McCarthy is going to have a very successful career at the next level. Not only does he have all the physical attributes you want, the arm talent, everything you need physical-wise out of a quarterback, but he's also got, his mentality is elite. The way he carries himself is elite. The way he interacts with people. I mean, I am like a nobody cameraman, and he would always make it a point to stop and say hello to me and have a conversation with me anytime our paths crossed. And so I just think he's that type of guy. I wasn't unique in that, by the way. He did that pretty much to everybody in the media. That's just the type of guy that he is. I think he is going to be very, very successful at the next level. So guys like LaShawn McCoy, I don't know what to do with that, but I saw it pop up and I'm like, damn it, we got to discuss it a little bit.
And as a diehard Vikings fan, if I didn't think JJ McCarthy would get the job done, I would have been talking about it for weeks and weeks about how I wanted JJ McCarthy on the Vikings. Like it's not because I like Michigan and I like JJ McCarthy in Michigan. It's because I think that he's going to excel at the NFL, and I think the Vikings scheme and offense fits him perfectly.
Yeah, and I think that's why your feedback on this is good, because you do have the Michigan knowledge, that side of it, but you're also a Vikings fan, and I take you at your word, Trent. Like, you're a pretty straight shooter. Like, you're not trying to gas guys up if you don't feel like they deserve it. And I feel like if you didn't think JJ McCarthy was the right quarterback for the Vikings, you'd be pretty upfront with that and honest about that. And we talked a lot about it leading up to the draft. You wanted the Vikings to select JJ. You thought this guy was the QB of the future, but obviously there's some analysts out there who don't quite buy into that. So again, we'll see what happens, but hey, man, I'm a big believer in JJ McCarthy, and I can't wait. Look, I might have to get the purple jersey. I see people in the comments, they're asking, Trent, when's that number 9 jersey going on the wall?
It's going to happen.
We know it's going to be up there. Who's that? Damian Lillard up there? Is that who that is?
Yeah, I got a Damian Lillard signed photo up there.
Trent, that might be the beauty. Trent is not he's not part of any sort of cult. I think Trent is just a sports fan. Like, you love the Vikings, but I see you got the Lakers jersey up there, Michigan stuff, Portland stuff. Like, Trent.
Well, so that Lillard, I get into some memorabilia breaks, and I won that in a break for not very much money, and I've always liked Lillard, so I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna put that up on the wall.
And you got it. What is that? A Chargers helmet that I see up there?
Justin Herbert, full size helmet.
Don't you have a Tomlinson helmet signed as well, or am I imagining that?
No, I don't have a Tomlinson.
Yeah. Okay, so that's probably still to come. But in any event, Trent, clearly a big sports fan. So I value Trent's opinion on these things because I think he brings a certain non-bias element to it. Let's move to an article that you put out. Was it this week? No, over the weekend it had to have been. Michigan's NIL. I guess. The group that leads in Michigan's NIL effort, Champion Circle. Trent, you put out an article about this, and I'm going to sort of just give people a little bit of background into what happened here, and then I'm going to let you talk about it a little bit since it was your article. But in case you haven't been following or you don't follow Champion Circle on social media, Champion Circle is basically Michigan's NIL outfit. This is the group that, Michigan strongly endorses, and they sign certain players to contracts to be part of, what the Champion Circle collective is. And over the weekend, Champion Circle was releasing certain athletes, photos of athletes that have been signed to new deals for the course of the year. And those athletes were guys like Colston Loveland, Donovan Edwards, Will Johnson. You can go down the list. Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, all these guys were there. And Champion Circle didn't just share those, but they also singled out one specific troll account, mainly on Twitter. I don't know if they exist anywhere else. I don't know how much information do we want to give about this account, because I do think it's valid for the understanding, right? So it's a Twitter account called Buckeye Scoop, and I believe this is run by a former Ohio State football player, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not going to give out his name. You can go and do your own research, but again, it's called Buckeye Scoop. It's ran by a former Ohio State player, and look, this guy. Do your research on him. He's had a bit of a bumpy history during his time as part of the media covering Ohio State. We'll just say that. But everybody, it seems like on Twitter, if you want to get somewhere, you got to have like a shtick. You got to have like a thing that you do, that stands out. And his routine is to, I think they call it shit posting, Trent, where you put trash out all the time with the sole purpose of trying to get some attention. And again, we talk about LaShawn McCoy. Here we are talking about Buckeye Scoop. So it works to a certain extent.
It does.
But you put this trash out with the hopes of it gaining traction, and people, whether they're talking badly about it, positively about it, either way they're talking about it. And that's the goal. And that's what Buckeye Scoop did during the early offseason, not just once, not just twice, but repeatedly, suggesting that Michigan was about to lose all of its top talent to the transfer portal. Wouldn't really give any specifics beyond that, but, specifically reference guys like Will Johnson, Colston Loveland, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Donovan Edwards. These guys were on their way out. Wait and see. It's all about to happen. Just pay attention to what's going on. And then lo and behold, It doesn't happen. Michigan keeps all of their top talent. And then on social media, Champion Circle, the Michigan Collective came out. And as they were announcing these guys, they retweeted Buckeye Scoop. And they were like, can we get an update on all this shit that you were talking over the last several weeks? So, Trent, you saw it. You followed it. You put an article out on it. What are your thoughts?
Well, I hate to recognize these troll Twitter accounts, but sometimes you have to, especially when something like Champion Circle comes back and fires back at them. But yeah, so
honestly, by the way, that's the only reason I'm mentioning it is because Champion Circle decided to mention it in their post. So I felt like it was worth mentioning. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be talking about it right now. But that's a good point, Trent.
So they had a whole post about Will Johnson back in early April. They had a photo of him at practice, and the caption was "actions over words," and because they were saying that his actions were he was going to transfer away from Michigan, even though he was saying he was happy in Michigan, he wasn't going anywhere. So then anyway, Champion Circle signs him to an NIL deal, and they quote tweeted Buckeye Scoop with update ? Because hey, he's still in Michigan. He didn't go anywhere. He's still on the team. And then the other thing that they did was, again, back in early April, Buckeye Scoop has a photo of Colston Loveland, Kenneth Grant, and Mason Graham with the caption "Chaos awaits," because Michigan's it's gonna be chaos when all three of those guys bolt. They go elsewhere. Well, once again, they did not leave. And Champion Circle also signed them, and they quote tweeted Buckeye Scoop with "Chaos has arrived," which I thought was epic.
It was great. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
And look, man, I mean, we know there's no shortage of those accounts on social media, especially on Twitter. I feel like that's unique to Twitter. To me, that's just a thing that people do when they're not interesting enough on their own. There are some people who are not interesting enough on their own, just providing good information where you got to find a way to get your name out there. And the only way you can think to do that is to do shit like what we saw from the Twitter account that was mentioned and the one that Champion Circle was tweeting at. But
accounts like that, they're just throwing things at the wall, hoping one thing sticks. And then, hey, I was right. I told you guys, you need to follow me. We are insiders. We know what's going on. But man, at some point in time, you just got to stop doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, he was very specific. He singled out players multiple times and said that these things were about to happen, and then they didn't happen. And so I'm not, if you're an Ohio State fan, look, I'm not trying to give Ohio State fans any advice. I don't like any of you, so I don't care what you do. But at the end of the day, why are you following that guy? What information are you getting from him? This is clearly a guy who, he wants your attention. That's what he's all about. And so I thought that was really interesting to watch, see the way that Champion Circle sort of went back at that account. But I will say this, and this is what I want to ask you. We spent a lot of time talking about the spring portal window, and we were very concerned, at least I was. I'm not going to speak for you, Trent. I was very concerned. I didn't think Michigan was going to lose all of their top talent. But when I looked at sort of, things as a whole and the amount of players that went to the NFL, the amount of coaches that they lost on staff, and then the fact that, Michigan's NIL isn't everything that it could be. I thought for sure Michigan was going to lose one or two big fish to the portal this spring. That didn't happen. Trent, let me ask you, how surprised are you that Michigan was able to retain all of those guys? And I'm talking guys like Will Johnson, Donovan Edwards, Colston Loveland, Mason Graham, and Kenneth Grant. How surprised are you that Michigan hung on to all of those guys?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a little surprised. I didn't think that what Buckeye Scoop was saying and other rival fan bases were saying how Michigan was going to lose everybody. I didn't think that was going to happen. But yeah, I mean, maybe they would lose a Mason Graham or a Kenneth Grant or Donovan Edwards or whoever to other schools that are bidding for players. But yeah, it didn't happen, and which is absolutely huge for Michigan that you're keeping that core together. But it just kind of shows you something about the culture Michigan has that as well as I do. There are schools throwing bags at Will Johnson or Donovan Edwards or Kenneth Grant.
Wasn't it? And I may not be accurate on this, but I know for sure somebody somewhere recently, somebody's family said that they had like a very lucrative offer for their son to move. Do you remember which player that? I think it was like 1.5 or $2.5 million.
Yeah, it was the reported amount. I think was 2 or 2.5 million, and the speculation was Will Johnson.
Okay, so so it was never confirmed which family it was, but there was a report out there that the parents of a Michigan player, a prominent Michigan player, this kid was basically offered $2.5 million to go elsewhere, and obviously opted not to, unless that guy was Keon Sabb, right?
Right.
Possibly.
And I don't know what school was offering that, but I guarantee you there was probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 big schools offering Will Johnson or whoever a bunch of money to leave Michigan and go play for him. But again, to me, it just goes back to the culture that Michigan has. They have a brand new defensive staff, but it didn't matter to these guys. They wanted to stay and play for Michigan. They're coming off a national championship run, and they want to try to do it again this season. So, bravo to those guys for staying at Michigan for another season.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Trent. I think I said it in my lead-in when I was asking you the question, but I certainly thought Michigan was going to suffer at least one big loss to the portal. Now, look, I know that a lot of people are going to look at a Keon Sabb or, a DJ Waller or a Jeremiah Beasley. And Trent, we talked about this last week on the show. I'm not saying that those guys are insignificant. But what I am saying is those guys are replaceable. Michigan can supplement those losses via the portal. They can supplement those losses in recruiting. Those are not losses that are going to have a massive impact on Michigan in the near term. You lose a guy like Will Johnson to the portal, that's going to have a massive impact on you immediately. You lose Kenneth Grant, and I don't know why I thought this, but I just did think this, and I continue to think this. If you lost Kenneth Grant, you were going to lose Mason Graham. I thought if one guy went, the other guy was going to go. I don't know why I think that. Maybe I'm just crazy. But if you lose one of those guys, that's a big problem up front. If you lose a Donovan Edwards, that's a huge issue. If you lose a Colston Loveland, that is a huge, huge issue for Michigan. So when I mean like a big, meaningful loss, I'm talking about guys that the Wolverines are going to lean on heavily in 2024 if they hope to win their 4th consecutive Big Ten championship and then make another run at the national championship, this fall. So, yeah, I mean, I'm real surprised. And Trent, I agree with you. I think it speaks to the culture that still remains in Ann Arbor. We were curious about that. Like you lose a guy like Jim Harbaugh. There's no way to replace that immediately. I wish Sharon Moore all the best, and I hope he makes the most of this opportunity. But Sharon Moore isn't Jim Harbaugh, and he'll be the first guy to tell you that. Jim Harbaugh is a coaching legend. You lose a guy like that, it's going to hurt. And then you take several key members of the staff along with him. There was every reason to believe that Michigan could feel the pain of those losses via the transfer portal for guys that are like, this is the team that I joined. This isn't the group of people that I came in with. Like, I want to go explore my opportunities elsewhere. They chose not to do that. I think it's a testament to what Jim Harbaugh built during his time here. I think it's a testament to who Sharon Moore is as a head coach, that these players believe in him. And ultimately, I think it's a testament to the guys on this roster that these are mature veteran players now. These guys are Michigan men. They want to be a part of the University of Michigan. They came in together. They want to go out together. And so I'm excited about it because now that portal window is closed and I look at what's on the roster, I'm excited about the season. People think they thought there was going to be a huge fall off for the Wolverines. There might be 1 or 2 losses on the schedule. I'll admit that. Do I think Michigan's going to go 8-4? Do I think that this is a 7-win team? Absolutely not. The Wolverines are going to be extremely competitive in 2024. They are going to be competing for a Big Ten championship. And even though that schedule is difficult, a lot of those tough games happen in Ann Arbor. You get Texas in Ann Arbor. You get Oregon in Ann Arbor. You get USC in Ann Arbor. And so some of these games that people might be a little bit worried about, like, Michigan's going to have the luxury of playing them in the Big House, and they don't lose there very often. Michigan is very, very good at home. So I think everything's lining up really well for Michigan to make another solid run here in the fall. Trent, anything else you want to add to that NIL conversation before we move off of that?
Do you think there would have been a good chance for Michigan to lose more star players if they didn't go with Sharon Moore as the head coach and they would have hired outside?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any question about it. I mean, these guys, they were pretty upfront during the spring that, they knew that this was Sharon Moore's opportunity, that was Sharon Moore's job. Shit, we saw it from the players themselves when after Harbaugh left, I think Zach Zinner on his way out, like he tweeted, it's Papa Moore's time, and then shared a picture of like Sharon Moore. Like these guys were advocating for Sharon Moore. So there's absolutely no doubt about it. If Michigan goes outside of the current staff and, they look to bring somebody from the outside in. Now it depends on who that coach is, but I certainly think they would have ran a much bigger risk of losing some significant talent to the portal if you bring a guy from the outside in. The beauty of keeping Sharon Moore there is that he's been with the staff for a very long time. He's paid his dues, but he's been a part of what these players have been a part of. They share a brotherhood like that. They've gone through the same things. They've been through the same battles. And so I think when you move a guy like that into the head coaching position as a player, you do feel a certain obligation to help. Granted, their main focus is their own careers and their own aspirations. But I got to believe they feel some sort of obligation to making sure that Sharon Moore's first year as head coach goes very well as well. Like you don't want to leave that guy high and dry with nothing. And so, yeah, those relationships that are there, it's important. And I just think everything that played out this spring in Michigan's favor is a testament to Jim Harbaugh, testament to Sharon Moore, and a testament to the maturity of these guys on the roster. Because I know for sure Will Johnson could have probably went somewhere else and got paid a lot more. I believe the same for Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and Colston Loveland. I think these guys could have chased bag, but they stayed in Ann Arbor. They have a common goal, a common mission, and I think it's going to play out very well for the Wolverines this fall. But we'll see. We'll see, because the schedule is difficult and there are still some question marks leading up to the season. Sticking with NIL real quick, I want to mention this because it was a cool thing that I did on Friday of last week. I once again had the privilege of teaming up with the Michigan Army National Guard. To get up. The weather was terrible, by the way. It was raining all day in Michigan on Friday. So the original plan was that we were going to fly up to Camp Grayling in these helicopters with a group of Michigan football players and some wrestlers. That didn't end up happening because of the weather. So instead, I had a van pull up at, 5:45 in front of my house, loaded with athletes. I piled in, and then we made a 3-hour drive north to Camp Grayling, where, they host this really cool event every year where they have hundreds of high school kids come out and be able to get hands-on with some of the gear and just, learn more about what the National Guard is all about. And obviously, the incorporation of Michigan athletes is huge in being able to do that. From the football team, it was Jay Sean Barham and Ernest Hausman, two of the guys who factored to be the starting linebackers this year. And then on the way back, once the event was over, they brought the helicopters up. The sun came out a little bit. The clouds cleared for a minute, and we were able to fly back. So just an incredible experience. I wanted to give a shout out to the Michigan Army National Guard because those guys are taking advantage of NIL, and I think they're doing it the right way, and they're using it to help bring attention to what they do at the Army National Guard, and I just think it's an awesome thing. I mean, dude, I've been in a military helicopter 3 times now. I've flown in a Chinook once and a Black Hawk twice. I feel like I'm damn near close to getting my pilot's license at this point. Trent, the next time I go, you might see me flying one of these bad boys. I got to try to get you up there with me because it's just – when you do it, it's like you understand why people who do that are built a certain way, man. It's just it's indescribable. But again, I'm grateful for the Army National Guard, the Michigan Army National Guard, for allowing me to be a part of it. We just spent a lot of time talking, Trent, about the transfer portal and the guys that Michigan didn't lose to the portal. Let's pivot a little bit, stay on the portal, but talk about some of the guys that Michigan has brought in. Since we were live last time, Michigan has added, I believe, 3 pieces since we were live last time. They've got 5 guys now that they've added from the portal. Starts with Josh Preby, offensive lineman from Northwestern. Jay Sean Barham, who I just mentioned, linebacker from Maryland. Dude, this guy had an incredible career. I mean, you're talking about a 2-year starter. He had 8 tackles against the Wolverines 2 seasons ago. He had an interception against the Wolverines last year. This guy is, I got to see him up close. I talked to my contact at the Army National Guard after the event was over, and I was completely honest. I was intimidated by Jay Sean Barham. This guy is big. He's intimidating. I am very, very excited about it. And now he's wearing the number 1 jersey, the linebacker position. This guy looks legit, man. I cannot wait to see him out on the field. And then Michigan went out and got a kicker. And Trent, you asked me about this You asked me about my concerns with the kicking game. We talked about Adam Samaha and kind of how he was 50% in the spring game. I don't know. How much can you really get from a spring game? Michigan went out and got a kicker. I'm going to slaughter his name, Dominic Zavada. Does that sound right?
That's how I would pronounce it. Yeah.
So Dominic Zavada from Arkansas State, veteran kicker there. And then this is a position of need. It's something that we talked about on the last show, Trent. Michigan goes out and they get C.J. Charleston, wide receiver from Youngstown State, a veteran wideout. And then the boy is back. We knew he was coming. There was a lot of smoke. We knew there had to be fire. Amorion Walker, he is back from Ole Miss after 3 months down south. I saw somebody mention that he just wanted to go down south for the winter and then come back to play for the University.
You can't blame him, man. You can't blame the guy at all.
He entered so he was with Michigan, won the national championship, and then in January entered the portal, transferred to Ole Miss, and then 3 months later or so, he's now back with the Wolverines. So, given all of those players that I mentioned, specifically with the wide receiver position, because we talked about how that was a position of need and Michigan was going to have to go to the portal and get some things there. Now you've got Kendrick Bell, Frederick Moore, Tyler Morris, Samaj Morgan. You add C.J. Charleston, Amorion Walker into the mix. You've also got Peyton O'Leary, and you've got some other guys on this roster. Trent, when you look at the wide receiver group now, do you think Michigan is done at that position? Do you think they've supplemented as much as they need to, or do you think there's still more work to be done?
I personally feel a lot better about it. Going into it, I think that's one thing that I said is I thought Michigan could have used 2 receivers in the portal and to go find themselves a couple players in the secondary, whether it's corner depth or even safety depth. And they landed 2 receivers. C.J. Charleston, his numbers aren't eye-popping, but he's going to be a 5th-year receiver. He's played in plenty of college football. I think he's 6 foot, so he's got decent height, and I'm sure he can make a little bit of an impact. And then, you go grab Amorion Walker back, 6'3", almost 6'4". He's that big-bodied receiver that I've been talking about for a long time now that Michigan really needed. Well, you bring him back into the fold. It sounds like he's definitely going to play receiver. And my gosh, you would think that he should be able to go in there right away and potentially maybe not start, but have a good role right away as a 6'3", 6'4" receiver on Michigan's roster.
I agree. But when it comes to Amorion Walker specifically, we've seen this before. We've seen this movie before where there was a lot of hype leading up, here's what he's capable of. And he made the transition from wide receiver to defensive back, and Jim Harbaugh was really talking him up. And then we saw during the offseason, videos come out of him going through his footwork and what his speed was and the athleticism that he had. It didn't really show up in 2023, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a jolt of excitement when I saw that he was returning. And I think most Michigan fans felt the same way, but there were some that were like, whoa, pump the brakes. Like this guy hasn't really done anything. Like, what are we excited about? I'm not trying to be negative about him returning, but Trent, do you feel that to a certain extent? Are we maybe overvaluing or overestimating what we can expect to get out of Amorion Walker? Or is the excitement justified based on, now maybe he's a little more experienced. He's spent time in the system. Granted, he did transfer out, but now he's back. Like, are we making more out of it, or should fans feel excited about this?
I mean, I definitely think there should be some excitement there. When he came to Michigan, I think he chose Michigan over Notre Dame and Michigan State, I think. But yeah, I mean, there was excitement when he came into Michigan as a freshman, and he played a little bit. And I believe at that point in time, Michigan had a lot of depth at receiver, and they did not as much at corner. So they moved him to corner. We have a 6'3", 6'4" guy that can go up there and play with the opposing big bodied receivers. And the way Jim Harbaugh was hyping him up, you thought he was going to be the next big thing at Michigan at defensive back.
Yeah.
And, who knows? Maybe that's why he transferred away. I don't know. Maybe he wanted to go back to playing receiver, and that's what Ole Miss told him. Hey, come play for us. We'll get you back where you belong at receiver. And, hey, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And he comes back to Michigan. And personally, this is just me speaking, I've got to think that played a little bit of a factor in. Michigan's like, hey, we need receiver depth. Come back. We need somebody that's taller that can go up and catch a ball. So let's bring you back into the fold, throw you out there and go make plays for us.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think I don't think the excitement surrounds anything that Amarian Walker has done throughout his collegiate career, because there's just not a lot of numbers there. I think the excitement is surrounded around the potential of what he brings to a wide receiver room that needs a guy who can go out and high point the ball. And he seems to fit that mold. He's familiar, obviously, with the University of Michigan, spent his first 2 years there, coming back for year 3. And so, yeah, I agree with you, Trent. I think the excitement is justified and it's valid, because he seems to fill a need that Michigan has in that position group specifically. But again, he's going to have to go out and perform, and he's going to have to go out to put up numbers for that excitement to ultimately come to fruition. But yeah, I'm glad that he's back. And I think overall, when I look at the wide receiver room, top to bottom, we know that Michigan's offense isn't going to change much. They're not airing it out. You know what I mean? You'd like to have a Jeremiah Smith on your roster, but you don't need that at the University of Michigan. Clearly, when I look at all the guys and all the weapons they have at that position, I think Michigan's fine. I don't know that they need to go out and get another wide receiver in the transfer portal. You add 2 guys like that into the mix, and I think now you're fine. Matter of fact, Amarian Walker was one of the guys that we talked about when we were talking about guys that have transferred out, Carmelo English, Darius Clemens, some of these other wide receivers, how nice it would be to have them back in the mix. Well, now we got one back in the mix, and it feels pretty damn good. So I think Michigan is good at that spot, but you had mentioned it before, Trent, on the defensive side of the ball, the corner position in the secondary, they've lost some pieces there. So I don't know that they're going to go nab a starter, but you've got to get some depth. And, from the reports I've seen, Michigan is exploring and they're looking at guys in the transfer portal, specifically in the secondary. So we should see some action there in the coming days. Let me see. Zach Izell from the Facebook page. Howdy to you. He's from Ohio. Maybe you guys live close to each other, Trent. I'm sorry, Zach, for your location, but hello to you as well. And then maybe Jacob might be looking at my notes a little bit. Jacob Morris from the Facebook page. He says, what do you guys think of the 2025 commits? I have some huge worries. It's a great question, Jacob, and it's something that I think we're going to address here as we move on to the next topic, because now that we're done talking about what Michigan's done in the transfer portal, I do think it's worth talking about recruiting a little bit. And when I say a little bit, it's because there's been a little bit of news on the recruiting trail. Not a lot, but a little bit. Some things to be excited about. On Friday, Michigan added 4-star offensive lineman Avery. Is it Gash, I believe. Gash. Okay. Avery Gash, 4-star offensive lineman, 6'5", 290 pounds. He's a Michigan native. He is the 5th commit in Michigan's 2025 recruiting class, a class that now ranks, according to 247 Sports, number 36 overall in the country and number 8 in the Big Ten. So middle of the pack in the Big Ten. Gash joins 4-star defensive lineman Nathaniel Marshall, 4-star quarterback Carter Smith, 4-star defensive lineman Bobby Kenka, and 4-star tight end Eli Owens. So Trent, they add Gash. Obviously, he was a big get, one of the top recruits out of the state of Michigan. You got to keep those guys home. They've got 5 members as a part of that 2025 class. There's a long time until signing day, but Michigan is still number 36 overall in the recruiting rankings, number 8 in the Big Ten. Jacob says he's concerned about the 2025 class. Do you share that concern?
I mean, to a certain extent, I do. Yeah, I mean, there's 5. They're coming off of a national championship, and you have 5 recruits in the 2025 class. And I realized, there was a huge coaching change that happened, and these high school recruits have to see how they mesh with the new coaches and how they fit with their potential scheme change and all of that. But at the same time, it's still Michigan, and even though they're not getting guys to commit right now, there's news breaking all the time that Michigan's making the top 4, top 5, top 6 for these recruits' final schools. And I mean, they're big name recruits. With that being said, though, recently 4-star running back Marquise Davis out of Ohio looked like a Michigan lock. Like he was 100% coming to Michigan. Tony Alford had him locked in and secured. And one day he just commits to Kentucky. And for whatever reason, Kentucky has been taking players away from Michigan in recruiting, and I don't fully understand that. But
Trent, I mean, the sandy shores of the Kentucky lakes, the sunshine year, Kentucky is like a destination place for this recruit. It can't be anything else, right? It couldn't.
Right? No, it can't be.
Else. Look, if I could get out of Michigan, I'm going to Kentucky. Trent, I'm sure same about you. You're trying to get out of Ohio. There's no doubt about it. I've got to imagine Kentucky's pretty high up on your list. So, you got to hand it to them. You're right. Michigan has lost a handful of recruiting battles now to Kentucky, which is straight. There were two twins. I forget who their names were.
The Smith, Jared and Jacob Smith, two defensive
linemen. I already forgot their names. Completely irrelevant to me. But yeah, they were committed to Michigan, and now they're down there in Kentucky. Yeah, I mean,
DJ Waller goes to Kentucky.
DJ Waller's down there in Kentucky again, loving the weather. I guess, is that the new Sunshine State? Maybe, I don't know, but I mean, at the running back position specifically. And I know it's early, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too far, but I am going to ask you, just based on what's happened so far early, are you giving maybe a little bit of credibility to what Ohio State fans were saying about Tony Alford on the recruiting trail? Or do you think this is just a string of like, okay, that one didn't fall our way, but we'll get back on track here? Like, has that thought slipped into your mind at all?
I'm not giving anyone that satisfaction right now about saying that they're right about Tony Alford.
I think that giving you the satisfaction.
I think he's done a good job getting these running backs that didn't seem like they were expressing much interest into Michigan until he got there. I think he's done a good job at least getting these guys to look at Michigan and Jordan Davison. He's an Ohio State lean. He's a 5-star running back, but hey, he just put Michigan in his Final Four. To my knowledge, there was nothing there until Alford got to Michigan, showing Davison had any interest in Michigan. So, I mean, he's at least getting these guys' attention to look into Michigan at the very least. But yeah, I mean, he's going to have to get one or two of these guys to commit for Ohio State fans to shut up.
I agree. No, you know what? They're not going to shut up. We know they're not going to shut up. They will never shut up. But I agree. I mean, you're going to have to make some noise here on the recruiting trail in the near future. Jacob Morris points out, and maybe he's got a valid point here from the Facebook page. He says Bama lost a head coach and filled a bunch of coaches, and check out their recruits for 2025. Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for that, and I'm not going to go back to the NIL stuff because we've already talked about it. But it's been mentioned in the comments that Michigan has a certain way of doing things, and obviously Kentucky has a certain way of doing things. Alabama has a certain way of doing things. And we're seeing somewhat of a case study in how that works out. Ohio State has a certain way of doing things. So far, at least over the last 3 years, the Michigan way of doing things has worked really, really well. But when you look at the recruiting rankings, I agree with you, Trent. It is a little bit puzzling to see Michigan there at number 36 in the country, coming off of a third straight Big Ten championship and winning a national title. You would expect to see the fruits of all of that work on the recruiting trail, and you're just not really seeing it. Now, again, Michigan has gone through a coaching change. They lost a lot of the defensive coaches. Michigan is sort of a program in transition right now, but I don't know, man. That feels like an excuse to me. This is still the University of Michigan. You still won a national championship. You still got Sharon Moore leading the way. I feel like they should be doing better on the recruiting trail. That being said, and I've said this before on our show, Trent, I don't really pay attention to recruiting rankings. I don't even pay attention to like, oh, this recruit put Michigan in their top. They just released their top 30 list and Michigan's on. Who gives a shit? Why? First of all, why are why are recruits doing this? Trent, maybe can you explain this to me? When I see a recruiting graphic come out and it's like, oh, so-and-so 5-star is down to his top 60 schools, and you see the logo is basically all over this graphic. It drives me insane. Even when somebody puts Michigan in their top 4, I'm like, okay, get back to me when they commit. And then even when they commit, I'm like, get back to me when they sign. And then even when they sign, that's not a guarantee that they're going to end up playing. Shout out to Jeremiah Beasley, by the way, out at Missouri. So I find it very, very hard to get excited about recruiting. And for that reason, I also find it hard to get like worried about recruiting because it changes so much. Nothing is ever guaranteed that when is it? December is early signing day. And then February is so we got a long time, man. And we know how college football works nowadays with players changing their mind. And, I'm committed here. Now I'm going there. And maybe the NIL dollars aren't going to be there like I thought they were. So we'll see what happens. Would you love to see Michigan higher in the rankings than 36? There's absolutely no doubt about it. But the reality is again, I don't get too excited about recruiting, so I'm sure as hell not going to get too worried about it.
Well, and one more thing, I sadly don't think recruiting means as much as it used to with the transfer portal nowadays. As we've seen this year, there was a record number of players enter the portal. So, I mean, even if Michigan only signs, I'm going to lowball. Let's say they only would sign 15, 16 kids in the 2025 class, which it'll be more than that, but let's just say they would. They go fill their needs in the transfer portal. They can go grab guys that are second or third year players that they could have for 2 or 3 more years. So it just, with the transfer portal, I don't think recruiting, it just doesn't mean what it used to mean.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, when you can go in the transfer portal and you can get a guy like Josh Preby, who's played a lot of football, was a team captain at Northwestern, like that's way more than than you could expect out of a high school kid in year one. Like, give me Josh Preby over any high school offensive line recruit, for a year anyway. Like, I'm taking Preby all day. So I think you're right. Michigan can supplement the roster via the transfer portal. But at some point in time, you've got to get it figured out on the recruiting trail. You've got to get it humming along, and you got to bring top flight recruits to Ann Arbor. And I don't know how you do that. If you're not willing to, to play some of the NIL games that some of these other programs are clearly willing to play, you've got to figure out another way to do that. And I've been of the belief for years now. I mean, before Michigan, if they could just beat Ohio State, if they could just win a Big Ten championship, if they could just win a national champion, they've done all that now. And we're looking at the rankings and it's like, what the hell? Where is it? Where is this influx of talent now that can't wait to get to Ann Arbor? It just seems a little bit strange. But again, I'm not going to get too high on it, so I'm certainly not going to get too low on it. I think water will find its level eventually. Michigan is going to bring in some more top recruits. They might finish, I don't know. I think they'll finish within the top 20. Do you think that's a pretty safe bet at this point? Like, I think they'll have a top 20 recruiting class nationally, and they'll probably finish. I think it would be disappointing if they finished outside of the top 5 in the Big Ten. Do you agree with that? Do you subscribe to those two things? Top 20, top 5 Big Ten?
I honestly, when it's all said and done, I'd be shocked if they're not in the top 15. I just feels like Michigan's always around that 10 to 15 range anymore. So I mean, I realize that it looks bleak right now, but it's also only May 6th. So yeah, but when it's all said and done, I really think Michigan will be a top 15 recruiting class.
Agreed. But again, dude, recruiting, like, it's just, I'm tuned out. I just don't care. I'm surprised that we've made it through so much of this show without completely going off the rails here. Like I said, I've been in a fog all day. I've got my ice pack, which is now just a sandwich bag of water that I keep
drinking now.
Yeah, I mean, but I think we're putting together a pretty damn good show here for a Monday evening, and we're at 52 minutes here. We've got like 5,000 people in here watching us live, which is incredible, Trent. Let's get to the final segment. Get to the final segment of the show. The final segment, and this is something I'm excited about. I put out an article about it last week, and by and large, I think people were mostly in agreement, but there were certainly some disagreement, mostly near the top of this list. But I basically put out my list for what I thought were the top 5 worst losses and best wins of the Harbaugh era. And I know that this is subjective. Like, somebody's worst win might not be another guy's worst win or best win, or, you might have different reasons why you categorize things a certain way. I went with like the impact it had on my heart and soul, like the pain index I felt or the joy index I felt. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this list. We're going to start with the top 5 worst losses of the Jim Harbaugh era. Then we're going to transition to the best wins from the Jim Harbaugh era. And Trent, you and I will just chop it up a little bit in the comments. If you agree or you disagree, tell us why. We might put it up on the screen and use it as a talking point. But let's get into it right off the bat. We'll start off with the worst losses, top 5 worst losses from the Jim Harbaugh era. Let's get to it right now at number 5. Oh, just seeing this picture brings
Just catch the ball.
But he was, listen, so this is 2019. This is Michigan at Penn State. I think Michigan was down 21-0 in this game, and then they rallied late. and they had a shot. This was to tie it up, right? To potentially possibly force overtime, if I'm not mistaken, or was this to take a lead?
This was to win, I think.
This was to win. I'd have to go back.
If I recall properly, I think if he caught that ball, they win.
But it doesn't matter because they didn't catch the ball. Shea Patterson to Ronnie Bell in the end zone. It hit him in the hands. It looked like he could have brought it in. The ball floats out. Michigan goes on to lose that game. I just remember like the photos of Ronnie Bell after that game and how broken up he was and how much that affected him. And, you know, it affected me that way too, man. It just like anytime you go into Happy Valley, I know it's not like a traditional rivalry with Penn State, but that's always a big matchup when those two teams come together. And it just felt like, especially being down 21 points and watching Michigan rally and get back in the game, it felt like we were on the verge of potentially a Michigan Classic win. And then to see the ball fall out of his hands like that, and then obviously how devastated he was afterwards. To me, this comes in at number 5 in one of the most painful losses of the Harbaugh era. A fair spot for this 2019 Michigan Penn State game, would you say? Was that a painful loss?
Yeah, I agree. I tell you, without even looking it up, I'm pretty sure if he catches that ball, Michigan wins the game, and that would have been a huge win at that point in time in the year for Michigan. So yeah, that was pretty gut-wrenching for the Wolverines.
Yeah, I think they were ranked number 18 at the time. You know, probably the guy who suggested this segment should know that, but he doesn't. See, this is maybe this is where it comes off the rails. I'm not aware if this was to tie or to win, but either way, he didn't catch it. It didn't matter. Michigan didn't win the game, and for that reason, it is the number 5 most painful loss during the Harbaugh era. Let's go to number 4. Trent, any guesses what might come in at number 4 here? A little bit worse than this one. Let's see if we're in line here. Do you remember this one? This is 2016 Michigan at Iowa at night, where dreams go to die in Kinnick. You know, Michigan was ranked number 3 in the country for this matchup, and it looked like the Wolverines were going to go in and do their thing. In 2016, they almost kind of had that feeling where it was like, this is a team of destiny. This is a team that's going to do, the breakthrough is coming. And then they get to Kinnick. They play the primetime game. You're right, Trent, a high scoring game. I think at this point it was like 13-12 or something like that. Whatever the hell the score was. Or Iowa goes out. They line up for the field goal. You just knew it was coming. They nail the field goal with time expiring. Number 3 undefeated Michigan goes down in Kinnick, and then Iowa celebrates on the field. I did everything I could. I tried to will the ball left or right, but I knew it was going to be straight down the middle. I knew what was happening. Anytime you play at night in Kinnick, it doesn't. Iowa could be 0-5, 0-6, 0-7. It doesn't matter. You got to go play at Kinnick at night. You better bring your A game. Michigan certainly didn't do that. They ended up on the losing end. And because of, top 3 in the country, and it looked like Michigan was headed a certain way, to me, I took this as a big loss. Now, implications-wise, it wasn't necessarily that big because Michigan had another opportunity in 2016 to break through later on in the year. We'll probably get to that in this list, I would imagine. But at the end of the day, top 3 team goes into Kinnick, loses on the last second field goal. For me, that was easily the number 4 most painful loss of the Harbaugh era.
Yeah, in 2016, I'm kind of out of. What am I? I'm like 1 year out of college. I didn't have professional thinking at this point in time, and I'm like, Michigan's going to easily beat Iowa. I know it's at Iowa, but Michigan's just superior, and they're going to go in there and take care of business. And boy, was I wrong. That was just, that was rough for Michigan.
Something about Kinnick at night, man. And look, I've had the privilege of being out at that stadium. It's just the drive out there is terrible. If you like boring ass drives from Michigan, then drive out to Iowa, or even drive out to Nebraska. If you like seeing a whole lot of nothing, I mean, that is God's country out. I didn't even know that much field area existed anywhere in the United States. But you drive out to Iowa or you go to Nebraska, it's fields for miles and miles and miles as far as the eye can see. It almost feels like you're on a different planet out there. But you get to Kinnick at night, and it can wake you up, and you can come to your senses pretty quickly. So that's number 4 on the most painful list. Let's get to number 3 here on the most painful loss of the Harbaugh era. Oh, this one hurt, Trent. This one hurt because and for those who are just listening, I've got the TCU semifinal game at number 3. This one was painful, man. I mean, going into it, we didn't really want to say it, but we all knew Michigan was going to win this game. We knew Michigan was going to the national championship, and TCU came to play. It was a high-scoring affair. Michigan made uncharacteristic mistakes, man, mistakes that they just couldn't make. Some calls didn't go their way. It just felt like everything that could go wrong did go wrong for Michigan, and for Michigan to be on the losing end of that game, it almost felt like that was going to be the closest opportunity they ever had to getting to the college football national championship, and TCU took it away from them. So for that reason, I put it at number 3. Trent, your thoughts on where this one comes in on the list?
Yeah, I think you're right on point. Going in that game, I think Michigan was favored by double digits, and everybody, I think everybody but TCU and TCU fans thought Michigan was going to win that game and go on to play for a national championship. And then even after the game, it's like, man, this was Michigan's best opportunity to get to a natty. Like, are they going to have that opportunity in the next few years? And then obviously we know what happened, but going back to that, yeah, I mean, Michigan, JJ throwing a couple picks, Khalil Mullings fumbled the ball.
The Roman Wilson touchdown.
Yeah, Roman Wilson touchdown that got called back.
And then they fumbled it, right? They fumbled it on like the goal line, turned it over there. The Michigan version of the Philly special where Colston Loveland rolls out. It was like Michigan just started playing completely out of character. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. I give them a ton of credit because for as much as they screwed up, they also made a lot of big plays and they battled back and they had an opportunity to win the game. But ultimately TCU was just too much. But man, that game felt like Michigan let the best opportunity that they were going to have to win a national championship slip through their fingers. And it was extremely painful. And then you go back to the hotel. We were out in Arizona. You go back to the hotel and you're watching Ohio State, Georgia, and Ohio State is right there on the verge. Here you have Michigan. They won the Big Ten championship. They beat Ohio State. And Ohio State is on the verge, one field goal away from playing for a national championship. And I think this is part of what's interesting about thinking about how these teams could, play each other multiple times throughout the season. Because even though Michigan had beaten Ohio State, even though Michigan had won the Big Ten championship, if Ohio State goes out and makes that field goal, and then they go to the national championship and play TCU and not Georgia, I think Ohio State wins the national championship. And to me, like,
for sure,
I take national championship over head-to-head in conference championship at any day of the week. So fortunately, the football gods were on our side that evening. And, what was he? Wide left, I think he was?
Yeah, he missed it to the left.
Wide left on the field goal. And Georgia went on to beat the shit out of TCU in the national championship game. So Michigan definitely would have been a better draw there. So that's number 3. You got to have an idea of what number 2 and what number 1 are. Maybe it's just a question of where the order is.
Yeah, it's either Barrett Short.
Don't say it. Don't say it, Trent. Don't say it. Let's get to the number 2 most painful loss during the Harbaugh era. Come on. There it is. Oh my God. I remember that moment. I remember when he crossed the goal line. I remember when he did that little celebration here. At number 2, I've got the 2016 matchup between Michigan and Ohio State in Columbus. Look, everybody references this game as the spot. JT was short. But when I was putting together this article, I went back and watched highlights, and it confirmed everything I already knew. Michigan made so many mistakes that they just couldn't make in that game that ultimately that was what cost them the win. I know that everybody wants to focus on the spot, but Michigan just did some things you can't do. Yes, absolutely, Joe from the Facebook page. You can't throw interceptions. Wilton Spate had an early pick 6.
Yeah,
I think Michigan had a costly fumble. Like, you just can't do that type of thing in Columbus. They went into overtime. They battled. They tried to keep themselves in it, but ultimately Ohio State was just too much. It felt like this was a point during Jim Harbaugh's coaching career. If you remember this back in 2016, where it felt like this was a fork in the road for the program, that if Harbaugh goes into Columbus and they get this win in 2016, the path for Michigan changes moving forward. But Harbaugh would go on to lose his first 5 against the Buckeyes. And a lot of people pointed to this game saying, like, this was the one that really turned the tide and had it going in a negative direction for Jim Harbaugh. So because of everything that this game meant, I mean, you could see it in Harbaugh's face after the game. He was hot with the referees. He was this short. He was saying into the mic, right? And for that reason, I put it number 2 on the list. Trent, where do you think about the placement for this game in particular? Because there were a lot of people who thought, no, this is the most painful loss of the Jim Harbaugh era.
I know what your number 1 is, but I see why.
Yep.
I see why you put your number 1, but to me, I think this would be my number 1. It's against the Buckeyes. Just the I don't know, it's just the magnitude of the game and the way Michigan played, but they played themselves back into it. Wilton Speight throws a late touchdown to go to overtime. I think his time was running out, he threw it, and they had so many opportunities to win this game. It was Jim's second year as head coach. If he wins this game, it feels like Michigan's going to do big, big things. And yeah, they let it slip away, and it was absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah, in terms of maybe like consequential losses, this would be number 1 on the list, but it was close to the top in pain index. But for so long, I mean, as a Michigan fan, you just got used to you lose to Ohio State at the end of the year. And this was more of like just a continuation of that. Like, I was excited. I thought there was a chance there. And then, Ohio State just goes and does what they do every year. So for me, at the end of it, it was more of the same. Even though it was painful, I mean, it's number 2 on the list. It was more of what I had experienced as a Michigan fan for so long. But when you talk about this next one, and we're just going to get to it, and I've been very, very clear about this. Number 1 on my list, most painful loss of the Jim Harbaugh era. It is the trouble with the snap game. I have never in my life as a sports fan experienced the type of pain and disbelief that I experienced that night watching that game. And it's one of those things, Trent, where I remember exactly where I was, exactly what I was doing, and exactly how it all played. Like I'm watching it as a movie in my head. My wife and I, we were still living just outside of Chicago at the time. She was sitting on the couch. I was down on the floor in front of the television. And I remember before this kick, I turned to her and I said, all he's got to do is get it off. All he's got to do is get it off and Michigan wins. And the sequence that played out after I said that, I remember I was like, low snap. No. Saw the bumble. No. Saw him try. No. And it was just a sequence of me screaming no all the way to Michigan State scoring the game-winning touchdown. I've never seen anything like that. And the fact that Michigan State, who is like an in-state hated rival, won on a play that is like a 1 in a billion type play. It had to play out perfectly for that to be the end result. Dude, I laid in bed the cogwheels in my mind were like coming off the rails. Like I just couldn't process what I saw. It took me well over a week to get over this loss again. I've never experienced anything like this as a sports fan. Trent, I know you said you'd put 2016 Ohio State at number 1, but what do you think about this game in particular at the top spot?
Like I said, I can see why you put it there. I agree. I've never seen anything like that in my whole life. And so that day I was actually in one of my best friend's wedding, and I was watching the game on my phone, and we got to the reception, and there was, I think, 5 minutes left. So I had it on my phone. I'm sitting with my parents at the time. I'm like, okay, Dad, like here's the game. All they have to do is get the punt off. They win. And I look at him like, Michigan just lost. And he's like, no, they didn't. I was like, Dad, Michigan just lost. And he's like, there's no way. And so then I showed him, I saw the replay and I showed it to him. And it's just, what happened? Like, and then you go back and you just try to keep watch. I kept watching him, trying to see, like, am I seeing, is this real? And every single time it was definitely real, but it just, I don't know. That was crazy, man. Absolutely crazy.
I heard so many stories like that of people who they started heading for the exits. They turned it off. They had a drive to make. So they got on the road and they turned on the radio and they were like, what the hell? How did that happen? Even after the game, there were Michigan State fans who were like packing it in the stadium, and they had put their signs away, and they were getting ready to leave. And then all of a sudden this shit happens, and they come rushing down. They've got their signs back out, and then you have D'Antonio exiting the field saying, "Where'd all the Wolverines go?" I mean, Mark D'Antonio, look, he was great for the rivalry between Michigan and Michigan State. There's no doubt. I hated that man. I've never I respect him and what he did, and I think the hatred I have for him is a testament to how good he was during his time in East Lansing. But I hated Mark D'Antonio with a passion, and to see him, lapping it up in the big house on the way out after a win like that in Jim Harbaugh's first year, by the way, which it was like, okay, Harbaugh's in town now. Like this Michigan State shit, this is done. This is over. And then D'Antonio comes into the big house and steals it away from Jim Harbaugh in his first year. I've never experienced a pain like I did the night that Michigan lost this football game, and the way it played out was just so improbable. Literally everything that could go wrong had to go wrong, and it did. And it wasn't just one thing. It was like 5 or 6 things that had to be worst case scenario all played out in a row, and never seen anything like it. And I hope we never see anything like that again. But Trent, you know what it is? The great news about going through all of these trials and tribulations as a fan is when you start to experience the other side of it, the flip side of those things, it makes it that much sweeter. And so for that reason, let's transition to Jim Harbaugh's, in my mind, what are his 5 best wins during his Michigan career. Let's get into it right now. Let's get this shit off the screen. I can't look at this picture anymore. Here we go, and it's a recent one. We've got 2023 Michigan versus Ohio State in the big house. Just another big time win. You got big time plays all over the field happening for Michigan, but this one was a close game. Unlike the previous 2 matchups with Ohio State, it wasn't a blowout. Michigan had to make a play on the final play of the game in order to seal it up. But anytime you beat Ohio State, considering how things were for the better part of 2 decades, you have to celebrate it. And to me, Michigan getting their 3rd straight win over the Buckeyes was like confirmation that this rivalry has now shifted hands. And for that reason, I put it at number 5. Trent, what do you think about the 2023 matchup at number 5? Would that make your top 5?
Yeah, probably. I mean, we went so long without Michigan even beating Ohio State, and then they've won 3 games in a row. So I imagine you have to put all 3 in your top 5 here. But yeah, I mean, in this game, I felt like Michigan pretty much dominated the games, but they let Ohio State back in it. Where I know the score was close, but I personally felt like Michigan controlled the game more so than what the score showed.
Yeah, and another important aspect and why I think this belongs at number 5 is, this game always seems to have incredible moments, things that you can look back on and say, that was incredible. And when Zach Zinner went down with that injury, to hear the way that the stadium responded, and then on the very next play, Blake Corum breaks loose, gets in the end zone, and flashes a 6-5 in the end zone. And it just felt like, even though it was close, it was like Michigan is not losing this afternoon. They are not losing this game. An absolutely incredible moment. And then Rod Moore, Jalen Harrell gets to Kyle McCord, forces him into a bad throw. Rod Moore comes up with the big play, makes the interception. And then you can see in the photo, he's waving goodbye to the good folks at Columbus as he runs off the field. I think that was just an incredible game. And I feel extremely fortunate that as a fan, I had to watch on TV for all those years, Michigan getting their asses kicked by Ohio State. And over the last 3 wins, I've been there in person, up close and personal to see these victories. And so this one comes in at number 5 for me. Let's go to number 4, the best wins of the Jim Harbaugh era. Ooh, this is weird to me.
Number 4?
It's weird to me that a national championship victory would be at number 4 on this list. But let me try to make my case as to why. The reason this one comes in at number 4, Trent, is because when I was there in Houston, there was not a single point during the evening, either before the game, when it kicked off, during the game, toward the latter part, that I ever, it had the feeling that Michigan was going to win and win convincingly. And once the game kicked off, that was how everything trended. Michigan just dominated this game the entire time. In terms of what kind of game it was a bit of a snoozer. Michigan was in control. as a Michigan fan, watching them dominate and win the national championship and all the hype that led up to it, I thought was great. But in terms of the game itself and what it did for me emotionally, not celebrating it, I'm not talking about the fact that Michigan won it, but just in terms of like the game itself, this one to me comes in at number 4. Obviously, it's a natty, so you got to put it in the top 5. But the emotions that I felt during this game, there were a few others that gave me stronger emotions. That's why I have it at number 4. What do you think about the national championship win over Washington coming in at number 4?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you about what you're saying. Michigan, they dominated the game, and like you said, I don't feel like there was any point in the game where it was like, I don't know, Washington might come back and win this game, because Michigan did everything that it needed to do to win. For me, I think I know what your next 3 are. So for me, I think this game would probably be number 3, and then I'll let you know which one I would flip it with.
Interesting. I like that. Trent. I like that we're going to have at least a little bit of controversy here, or a little bit of dissent as we get into the top 3. I feel like it's weird to me that we're just, let's breeze through national championship number 4. Okay, let's move on. Like, Michigan won the natty here. And I think the cool thing about this game is for weeks, it was like, wait till the Wolverines get to Happy Valley. Well, that didn't happen. Well, wait till Ohio State comes to Ann Arbor. Oh, well, that didn't happen. Wait till Michigan's got to play Bama. They're scared of playing Bama. We know how that turned out. Wait till Michigan has to face Michael Penix in the national championship. They haven't faced an offense like what they're going to see with Washington. Snoozer. So, again, like, yes, it was a national championship. I'm so grateful that we were able to witness it and that it happened for Michigan. But the game itself, a little bit of a snoozer. Let's go to number 3, see where we're at. Number 3. I've got 2022 Michigan at Ohio State, otherwise known as the Donovan Edwards game. I mean, this game to me was incredible. I think going into this game, Michigan hadn't won in Columbus in like 20 years. We wondered what the weather was going to be like. The Buckeyes had CJ Stroud. They had Marvin Harrison Jr., high octane offense. The weather was great that day. So it was like, okay, we might have a bit of a track meet. It turns out we did have a track meet, Trent, but Donovan Edwards was the one leading the race all afternoon. And then shout out to the other guy in the picture, Cornelius Johnson, who had a touchdown reception. Colston Loveland also had a touchdown reception. J.J. McCarthy, 3 touchdown passes. McCarthy also had a rushing touchdown on the afternoon. And ultimately, Michigan goes into Columbus and beats the Buckeyes by 20-plus in their own building. This game has to be at number 3 for me. Trent, what say you?
So this is the game that I would flip-flop, and I'm not downgrading the win at Ohio State because it was absolutely significant. But kind of like the Washington game, I felt like Michigan controlled this game. They thoroughly dominated Michigan or Ohio State in the trenches, and because Michigan won the national title against Washington, for me, I would put that game at number 3, put this game at number 4. Now, if this game when it came down to the wire, Michigan kicks a last-second field goal, or Donovan Edwards broke that big run to win the game, then this game would probably be at number 3 for me. But just because of those reasons, I would flip-flop them.
Interesting. I find that very interesting. I mean, I don't see any feedback from the fans in the comments. I mean, what do you think about what Trent said there about, flipping this with the national championship game and putting this at number 4? I have a hard time doing that, man. This was a big deal. Michigan this was to get their second straight win in the rivalry, to prove that they were back for real going into the horseshoe hostile environment, and then to win the way they did, dominate the way they did. I see, we got at least one guy chiming in here. Joe, winning in the shoe keeps us at number 3. I agree. But then Matt Kirby comes back and says, hey, this beatdown was expected. This is just what we do at the University of Michigan. We beat the shit out of Buckeyes. They certainly did that that afternoon, and that's why I put it at number 3. But I like that there was a little bit of dissent there, Trent. We got to have some disagreement to keep it interesting, damn it. Otherwise, it's just, what are we doing here? We agree on everything. Number 2 on the list is that magical 2021 game between the Buckeyes and the Wolverines in Ann Arbor. The snow is falling. Michigan finally gets the monkey off its back, dominates the Buckeyes in Ann Arbor. You get the Ojabo soundbite, and Hassan Haskins goes off for like 50 touchdowns. I think he had 5 touchdowns on the afternoon, set like a rivalry record for single game rushing touchdowns. this game to me, with the snow falling and the celebration that ensued after Michigan won the game, it felt like it was like a movie, like you were watching a movie play out in front of you. Just an absolutely incredible game. And then considering how often Michigan had been on a losing, I mean, you're talking about losing for like a decade straight to the Buckeyes before you get this win. This one comes in at number 2. A lot of people thought this was number 1. Trent, what do you think about this game?
This is my one.
This is your number 1.
This is my number 1. This day, this was the first season I was a credentialed member of the media. I think it's same with you. This was my birthday, November 27th of 2021.
All
the
right.
snow was coming down. It was Ohio State, Michigan. Michigan hadn't beaten Ohio State in forever. And they, from the very first start of the game, dominated. Hassan Haskins, beast. Offensive line was great. Michigan's defense was terrific. Like you said, it kind of felt like a movie. And I realize you're number 1. Like that was a terrific game as well. Went into overtime, but something about Michigan beating Ohio State on that day with the snow coming down, it just, for me, it makes it number 1.
You know, I think you have a much stronger argument with this one than with the 2022 and the national championship game, flipping that, because for anybody who puts this at number 1, I can't push back too hard. You're right, Trent. I was there. It was my first year as a credentialed member of the media. Being able, now this, I wasn't taking photos at the time, so I was up in the press box watching it from the bird's eye view, but just the way that the fans rushed the field and the way that everything looked, and Aiden Hutchinson celebrating with his family in the stands. And you could see it on his face, like all of the hard work it took to get to that point, everything it took to turn the rivalry in Michigan's favor. Like you could see it in the emotion on the players' faces. And it was an incredible afternoon, and it's Michigan versus Ohio State. It's the greatest rivalry in all of sports. And so when the Wolverines come out on top, and when they do it in the fashion that they did, and then you're right, the snow falling, it's your birthday, for Christ's sakes. How could you not put it at number 1? I think this game makes a strong case for number 1. Maybe we have a 1A and a 1B, because I could easily see this being number 1. But Trent, we know which game I've got at number 1 on the list. Let's just go ahead and move right to it. Here we go. Number 1, Michigan, Alabama, Pasadena, the Rose Bowl, Saban, Harbaugh, overtime with a shot to go to the national championship. And everything I just said there before, as a fan, those are all recipes for Michigan losing a game, right? Everything's on the line, big time opponent, big time atmosphere. This is a game Michigan doesn't win. Holy shit. Down on the sideline, taking photos. It's hard because normally, you want to stay behind the lens and capture everything. It was really hard to not be a fan that night and just sit back and watch what was playing out in front of you, because it was absolutely magical. And given the weight of this game, given all the factors that I mentioned before, this felt like the national championship game to me. Like when we talk about that Washington game, like I feel like whoever won this game was going to go win the Natty, and it just so happened to be Michigan. To me, this was the national championship game. And then you have Pasadena, you have the Rose Bowl, you have the pageantry of it all. I have said this before, and I will say it again on the show. I'm not so sure that I will ever see a game this good for the rest of my life. And Michigan made mistakes. And in fact, that played a big role in why this game was as emotional as it was, up and down. Michigan made some big mistakes that could have cost them. And like I said before, traditionally in those instances, Michigan comes out on the wrong side of these things. But on that night, Michigan came out on the right side, sent Nick Saban into retirement, sent the Wolverines off to win a national championship. I think this is the most incredible game I've ever seen, and I think it will remain number 1 probably for the rest of my life. Trent, I know you're not going to push back too hard on it because of all the things I just said, but what do you think about this game at number 1?
Yeah, once again, I see why you put it there. And, maybe I unfortunately wasn't able to go to this game, and maybe if I were there in the press box, I would have a little bit of a different view. But just being there at that Ohio State game in 2021, just like everything that I said, Michigan hadn't beaten Ohio State in so long, and the snow coming down, to me, I feel like that's probably, as of right now, one of the greatest games I've ever seen. And just being there in person just makes that magnitude so much higher. But I can't disagree with what you're saying, because this game was terrific, and normally Michigan would lose a game like this, but they came back and won it in overtime.
Yeah, and I agree. Maybe, but we have some people saying greatest game I've ever seen on television. I mean, like I said, I think you could have 1A, 1B with the 2021 Michigan Ohio State in this game. And maybe there is something to be said for seeing it in person. I'm not sure how differently I would have felt watching it on TV, but yeah, I mean, I've already said it all. I've said everything I can say about this game. I think it was incredible from start to finish. There was so much on the line. And I think as a Michigan fan, you just get used to coming up short in those big moments, particularly against a program like Alabama. And then you had the whole lead up to it where, the video comes out from Michigan seeing who they, what the draw was in the playoff. And, oh my God, Michigan is afraid of Alabama. And it's like, well, did they really react that way? Do they know something I don't know? And Michigan went in and they fought and they battled and they came out on top. And just an incredible experience, incredible night from start to finish. And for that reason, Trent, I put it at number 1 on my list. Whew, we breezed through that. We are at 1 hour and 25 minutes on the podcast. I thought we might go for like 30 minutes tonight based on how I was feeling. It turns out we went for 1 hour and 30 minutes. Trent, what did you think about the list, all things considered? How do you think I did?
I think this was probably your best list that you've had yet, Chris. I
appreciate that.
I think that you're not going to get a whole lot of pushback from many people out there on Facebook. Probably
not. And like I said, leading up to it, and I think some people had mentioned it in the comments, man, like those wins and the ride that we went on, particularly this last year, going 15-0 in the Rose Bowl and beating Ohio State, winning a national championship. Like when I go back and look at those losses, I just feel like at the time it didn't make sense, but we needed those, man. You needed to feel that so that you could really experience the joy on the other side as a Michigan fan, like we did in 2023. And shout out to Team 144. Shout out to Charles Woodson, by the way, for dropping that commemorative bottle, which sold out in like 3 hours. I feel like I told you, Trent, I feel like I ate a little bit of commission on that. I feel like Winged Helmet Media might have moved a few bottles here and there. But overall, again, watching those, looking at those pictures and kind of reminiscing about that stuff, it's just been an incredible ride. And hopefully it continues with Sharon Moore and Team 145, because I think they've got a lot of the pieces to do it and continue it. But we know it's going to be a battle. We know this ain't no cupcake schedule this year, Trent.
No.
The people aren't going to be talking about Michigan doesn't play anybody until week 6 or week 7. Michigan's got to play a lot of somebodies pretty early on and throughout the entire year. So I'm really, really excited to see the way this season plays out. And Trent, I can't wait to cover it with you. And hopefully we'll be celebrating another win over Ohio State, another Big Ten championship, and what the hell? Let's make it 2 straight national championships while we're at it. What do you say?
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great recipe right there.
Let's give it a shot. Hey, I appreciate all the people who hung out with us on a Monday evening. We might have to adjust the time a little bit. Maybe we'll try it out at 6. I saw some people had to duck out early because they had other things.
A couple people.
Maybe wanted us to play with it a little bit. So we'll explore that. But we will be back next Monday, either at 6 or 7. Monday is the new day now. Appreciate you guys for stopping in. Appreciate you, Trent. And we'll see you next week.
All right, man. Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.